Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you three major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This weekend, we're bringing you each of these stories separately so you can listen over a shorter, discrete period of time. Hope you enjoy them.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we are sharing the three main sections from our episode 5. Roger will provide more information after these notes from our sponsors.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations, LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. On April 15th, 2025, LiverRight will open America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight, that's liver, and then RIGHT at www.liverright.com.
Tawazin Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazin Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers increasingly throughout the world. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazin Health link on the SurfingMASH homepage. This week, our roundtable on drug development includes Roger, Jörn, Louise, and hepatologists and key opinion leaders Naim Alkhouri and Sven Francque.
This week, our roundtable on drug development with Naim Alkhouri and Sven Francque joining Louise, Jörn, and me starts to look at the issue of FGF-21s and cirrhosis. Naim Alkhouri starts in FGF-21s by talking about some of the symmetry data from Efruxifermin, and particularly as it applies to MASH cirrhosis. After discussing that data, he notes that promising early data exists in the FGF-21 Pegozafermin for cirrhosis, and while the third FGF-21, Efimosfermin, does not yet have cirrhosis data, the non-cirrhosis data that exists leads to hope it will support cirrhosis as well. On top of that, he notes, there is early data in the resmetirom open-label program suggestive that resmetirom may have some effect on cirrhosis, and cirrhosis is being studied specifically in the Maestro-NASH trial. Jörn Schattenberg concurs that cirrhosis is the largest unmet need. He notes the trials to date are with compensated cirrhotic patients. Sven Francque considers these trials so powerful because cirrhotic patients, MASH cirrhotic patients specifically, are the hardest patients to treat, and likely due to the mode of action of FGF-21s, they get results. He also notes that one might find outcomes even when patients do not regress, which he suspects might turn out with other classes, maybe GLP-1s or other incretin classes in cirrhosis. I asked for comments on how broad cirrhotic patients are covered in the current FGF-21 trials, and in general, what we have for decompensated cirrhosis. Sven notes that portal hypertension and MASH cirrhosis is tougher to treat than alcohol or viral cirrhosis. But he also notes that we can have an impact on portal hypertension even without regressing cirrhosis. Naim notes that trials are starting to include decompensated cirrhosis measures for portal hypertension and varices, and that the belapectin studies specifically target these patients. Data will be presented on those at EASL. Louise Campbell notes that it will require, as she puts it, great PR to let providers know that we can treat and even regress cirrhosis today. And Naim discusses what that means in context of some of the other protocols that are in place today. Let's start with our first session of the day, which is our roundtable. Our roundtable this month is on drug development. This will be something we'll be doing annually every April in honor of our friend Stephen, since it's in the period between when resmetirom was approved and when unfortunately he passed last year. And in fact, next week we'll be doing an episode dedicated to Stephen and issues around Stephen and Summit, and drug development seemed like an appropriate part of that. With us, we've got Jörn, who is driving. Jörn, how are the roads today in Germany?
It's good. It's good. Again, just past Ramstein, U.S. Air Base here. Actually, we're happy about some rain these days because it's been a little bit droughty here, so things are good.
Good to hear that. And we have about half of Naim who'll be with us for the first half to two-thirds of this session, and you'll have to leave. Naim, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you join us, my friend. And then for the first time in a bit, we've got Sven Francque with us. Sven, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm happy to be with you.
You look tremendously relaxed and just back from holiday. Now, I know that already, but...
I had my Easter holiday last week, yes.
And we'll talk about that on Groundbreakers. And then we have Louise, whose Liverpool team is streaming towards the Premier League title, whatever else is happening with them. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And we're getting rain for the first time in about 3 weeks. And I'm sitting in a glass room
so you might hear it in the background, but I'll be on mute most of the time for that. It's nice, it's welcome for a day.
I will also be on mute most of the time because we have no rain here this morning, but I am still harboring the laryngitis and technical term, bronchial yuck that affected me last week. So if my voice doesn't sound great, that's fine, and I will be on mute, and these folks will watch me hacking and whatever else I'm doing in the meantime. With that, why don't we go to Groundbreakers? One piece of good news from the last week or so. Sven, why don't you go first, because I think I know where you can talk about your holiday a little bit, and then everyone else can go after that.
Now that my holiday is over, that's not a good news, of course, for me, but I much enjoyed it. I spent a few days in Spain, in Marbella, and, well, with the climate change, the weather was better in Belgium even than in Spain, but still we had a great holiday. So charging batteries from time to time is what a human should do.
And professionally?
Professionally, everything quiet. Looking forward to the EASL Congress in 2 weeks, which is, of course, for the EASL Governing Board, a huge amount of work of preparation, but we're looking forward to a great Congress again in Amsterdam. So.
Well, for everything Alexander said on our episode last week, it should be fantastic. He really quite raved about it.
Oh, yeah. A lot of new exciting things to pick up there.
And with that, brave one, go next.
I'll go next. I have my spring break with the kids coming up next week, so we'll be going to Honolulu, and I know my kids will be surfing. I'll be just hanging out in the ocean, so I'm excited for that. On a professional note, we got the late breakers, notifications from EASL, and we have some exciting stuff that I'll be presenting, including the data from the galectin program with belapectin in patients with cirrhosis, MASH cirrhosis, and evidence of portal hypertension. We also have some promising data from the Madrigal cirrhosis program looking at changes in NITs. So more to come on this, but very exciting stuff that will be presented at the late breaking session on Saturday during EASL.
Fantastic. And while Jörn is still on mute, Louise, why don't you go next? And then Jörn will come off mute.
I love Honolulu. You've got to go up to Fumi's. It's like a little shack type thing that does the best shrimp in the area. And it's an experience, that's all I'll say. So the girls will love it. Actually, my positive of the week is we have had the first woman of colour, Dr. Mumtaz Patel, now voted in as the president of the Royal College of Physicians. Now, she was acting president when I got my graduation. So she was really supportive. As you can understand, as the only nurse that's ever been given an FRCP, it's quite an intimidating place and surrounded by lots of physicians. So she was very welcoming, very supportive, and it's great to see the Royal College of Physicians leading with women of strength in different areas. So I'm going to congratulate her and the move with the Royal College of Physicians today.
Hear, hear, as do we all. Okay, Jörn, you're up.
Yes, of course. Also, personally, Easter holiday break coming up. I'll take the holiday, some time off with the family. That will be very nice. We'll go to northern Italy or Südtirol, as we call it. So looking forward to that. And then soon after that, EASL is coming up, and I can also feel the heat. I'm not part of the governing board as Sven, but I see how well a job they did organizing many things. I've been in contact with the EASL core team, and I'm happy to support the meeting, of course. So I agree, the late breakers. Naim's going to present data that will be of interest. Parallel session, there's going to be one I'm cheering on new therapeutics, and of course a number of poster presentations that are being ready. I think the deadline for poster upload was just around the corner, and I think there's another one next week. So really a lot of stuff, a lot of emails flying around on that part of data being put into EASL.
Deadlines are right around the corner. A lot of presentations, a lot of exciting things happening at EASL.
That's exactly right.
I guess my best news is that I'm not dead yet. All facetiousness aside, I've been wrestling with this bronchial sinus all over infection. I think you heard it in my voice last week. You'll hear it again in my interview with Scott Friedman, which I did yesterday, and with Nagachala Sani, which I'm doing later today. I'm going to allow these folks to do most of the talking while I go on silent. But other than that, very excited about EASL, and we'll talk about this in the business report, but thanks to you folks, the return numbers on the podcast have been far better than what I expected, and more cards and letters. Well, not cards, but letters, and emails and text messages, so thanks for all that. And with that, we will roll ahead. This roundtable will cover the next 4 episodes, and we'll be talking about drug development. It's been, as Mazen pointed out in his summary last week, it's been a fantastic year for drug development, and I'd like to take some time and go through the various important pieces in order. Naim, since you're only with us for half the session, why don't you pick what we talk about first?
We can talk about exciting data with FGF-21, if that's of interest.
Let's start there. That's fine. Go ahead.
One of the biggest news is data we saw in the Symmetry trial. This was, a study that looked at patients with MASH cirrhosis. They had biopsy at baseline and then biopsy at 96 weeks. And we actually saw a significant improvement in fibrosis in a cirrhotic patient population, with 39% regressing from F4 to F3 fibrosis with the high dose Efruxifermin. So this is very exciting. The abstract will be presented at EASL at one of the plenary sessions. I think publication will follow. But for us, as a field, this is very exciting. This is the first positive trial in a cirrhotic population showing a reversal on biopsy. So I think it's a game changer. Obviously, the sample size is small. We need to have, a large phase 3 to confirm this, which is ongoing now. This is part of the AKIRA 106 trial that's looking at patients with MASH cirrhosis. But what was exciting is that this improvement in cirrhosis was noted in the per protocol analysis, but also in the intent to treat analysis, which gives us more confidence that the signal is true. And I hope that we can confirm this also with the other FGF-21 agonist. We have some preliminary data with Pegozafermin in a small cohort of cirrhotics showing improvement. We have promising data with the Efimosfermin and non-cirrhotics, but hopefully we can demonstrate efficacy in a cirrhosis population. I think this is the highest unmet need now. These patients don't have any FDA-approved therapeutic options. Resmetirom is still not indicated in cirrhotics, but we're also seeing some promising data from the open-label cirrhosis program with resmetirom. And then we have the MASH outcomes trial. It's ongoing, and we should have the results in the next couple of years.
I was going to underline what Naim said, that obviously the cirrhotic population is one of the biggest unmet needs. As hepatologists and people on this call and the one you have later in the podcast are obviously seeing those patients, and we have hardly anything to offer them. Now, the ability to reverse, I would say, early histologically confirmed cirrhosis, these are not decompensated patients that are showing up late in our clinics, is a groundbreaker. And I'm really excited to see the phase 3s rolling out. And this fits into a landscape where we have FDA-approved treatment for non-cirrhotic MASH, as Naim mentioned, first in class, a situation where there's probably additional compounds coming down the pipeline that have increased efficacy. And it's so exciting to see actually movement on both frontiers in terms of the disease stage, cirrhotic and non-cirrhotic patients.
Sven, Louise, go ahead. I have a couple of questions, but someone else go ahead first if you'd like.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things here for me is that we clearly see those results in a difficult to treat population, or a population in which is difficult to demonstrate benefits. So these are very powerful results, and they probably relate to the mode of action of the FGF-21s with their, of course, they have pleiotropic effects, but one of the important ones is, of course, their effect on the adipose tissue and the function of the adipose tissue. And what we saw, for example, with the GLP-1s is that, I think Naim was one of the important coordinators of that study, that there was, in terms of fibrosis regression or cirrhosis regression, another positive result, which does not mean that they do not have a benefit, because that's not an outcome trial. I'm quite confident that if you would go for outcomes, that knowing the effect of the GLP-1s, there would be some benefit also in patients with cirrhosis, but not very powerful in terms of having a regression of cirrhosis with this compound, and probably also with other ones, due to their mode of action. Even if you have such a stringent endpoints as fibrosis regression of one stage in people that have already established cirrhosis, you have a positive result, which means that most probably in terms of clinical outcomes, it will be even more powerful. So I think that is the true highlight of these results, is that even in that population, you can achieve, depending on the mode of action of drugs, you can achieve even going back one stage and having regression of cirrhosis, which is very powerful in terms, most probably, of later on clinical benefit, making this really a huge step forward. And again, we're heavily relying on histology. It's not so easy to have long-term outcome studies that are beyond any discussion you can have. But meeting this very high barrier endpoint is very promising and an important breakthrough in this field. So indeed, there is promise now, even in this category of patients, although I think that other drugs also might still have a benefit, but as I said, not powerful enough to meet those stringent endpoint of cirrhosis regression. But that's, of course, not the only thing you need to improve the outcome of patients. So the discussion about improving the outcomes and the endpoints is still something that we need to work on.
Just to follow up, Sven, I think we're much closer though, right? In the non-cirrhotic trials, I agree. We have a long trail to outcomes, but we've been discussing that, and I'd be interested to hear also Naim's thought again. I mean, in the cirrhotic population, depending on how we select the patients, the outcomes are not 20 years down the line. This is something where we're seeing more sooner impacts. I think it's reasonable to propose these outcomes trials moving forward.
Yeah, sure. But you're absolutely right, and you're pointing to an important thing. It's about the selection of the patients, of course, in terms of having a reasonable number of outcomes in a reasonable time frame. And there the selection is, of course, key. But you're absolutely right. That's something which is more feasible than in early stage. Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, the only data we have that histologic improvement leads to better outcomes comes from a cirrhotic population within the Gilead program, where we showed that patients that regress from F4 to F3, they have significantly lower rates of liver outcomes. This was a paper by Arun Sanyal from the Salon-Sertab program. So I think showing a reversal of F4 going to F3 is a very strong surrogate for outcomes. And I think, if we have a larger sample size, as a hepatologist, I will be convinced that these patients that go from F4 to F3 are less likely to develop outcomes. And of course, all these trials will follow patients for a longer period of time, and we will look at liver decompensating events, overall mortality, need for liver transplant, and changes in MELD score. And this will be a composite outcome-driven endpoint.
So, question for all of you. Mazen last week, and some of the discussion in earlier episodes about the Emerging Trends Conference, noted that in the Efruxifermin data presented there, while cirrhotic patients did not go all the way to portal hypertension, they had some pretty sick. It wasn't simply the patients with highly compensated cirrhosis, but they had some patients who were pretty close to portal hypertension in that trial, as suggested. I wonder if any of you can comment any more on that based on data that you're allowed to share, or do we know anything more from other studies about what we might be able to see for compensated cirrhotic, patients with decompensated cirrhosis, or kind of at that borderline between the two?
So I would say, and Sven has done a lot of work on that, including clinical significant portal hypertension. The progression along the spectrum of the severity of CSPH is something that is linked to outcome, and prevention of that progression is currently something we're studying in those trials. And I think that's another important surrogate that's feasible and doable in these settings. But maybe I'll hand it over to Sven to hear his expertise on the CSPH.
Yes, and the pattern of CSPH is also a little bit different than in alcohol-related disease or in viral hepatitis-related disease, for example. So, and it's a continuous spectrum. And that's also something we have to take into account. And it's not just the fibrosis that determines the portal hypertension. There's a lot of other mechanisms that contribute to it. And that's also one of the reasons why I said about the FGF-21s that their impact on adipose tissue function is an important one, because there's an important crosstalk between the liver on one side and the adipose tissue and the gut and some other organs on the other side. So there are a lot of driving factors for that portal hypertension. And so the improvement in that is also the add-on of different effects. And the fibrosis is only one component of that. And so the benefit of these drugs is beyond just their impact on fibrosis. Of course, we're looking at fibrosis or surrogate markers of it to have an idea about the efficacy of a drug, but there's way more than just that. And that's probably also one of the things that is more subtle. But if you can improve that, even if you do not have that formal regression of cirrhosis, and I agree with Naim, it's a very strong predictor of improved outcome. But even if you do not achieve that, but you have an impact on portal hypertension, you will have an impact on the prognosis of these patients and their evolution towards decompensation.
And just to follow up on this, Roger, we are including clinically significant portal hypertension as an endpoint in some trials. For example, with the survodutide, the dual agonist, GLP-1 and glucagon, we are looking at endoscopic endpoints, and we're including patients that progress to high-risk varices as one of the endpoints. I think this is going to help with potentially achieving more outcomes quickly so we can demonstrate efficacy benefit over placebo. Of course, survodutide, they have a small phase 1b trial where they showed safety, but maybe a hint on efficacy in patients with advanced disease, early decompensation, Child-Pugh-B. So that looks very promising. And then in the Galectin trial, we actually included patients with clinically significant portal hypertension that was defined by low platelet count, having splenomegaly, or the presence of collaterals. But we did not include anyone that had varices at baseline, so that was an exclusion if they had any varices on the initial EGD. And then after we treated them, we did a second EGD to look at the percentage of patients that progressed to having varices. And these are the data that I will present at EASL. There was a press release, and if you look at the 2 milligram dose with belapectin, there was actually less progression to varices. So I think a very important endpoint, clinically significant portal hypertension. There are different ways to look at it, endoscopically or through the Baveno criteria, liver stiffness. And I think you're going to see more and more trials including this as an endpoint.
It's extremely exciting and encouraging. And we've got to do great PR to reverse the common philosophy that cirrhosis is irreversible, because that's been the long thought out theme throughout medicine and most other areas. So like hepatitis C being curable, we're now going to have to rewrite that book for everybody as well, which is excellent news and a great challenge. But managing patients today, Naim, what is the difference in the studies to standard of care? Do they get more physio? Do they get more input clinically to keep fitter and healthier around the medication that they're receiving? And if not, what can I take as a physician on the ground floor, seeing patients every day, saying, this is what's coming, this is how we keep you fitter, healthier now to be in the best position in the future?
Let me focus on patients with actually advanced disease, cirrhosis with clinically significant portal hypertension, because even before the clinical trials and approval of resmetirom, we've had a lot to offer this patient population as hepatologists and gastroenterologists. When you have a patient with cirrhosis and clinically significant portal hypertension, of course they need HCC surveillance. So we start imaging plus AFP every 6 months. I think this is crucial. And this is true for all cirrhotics, with or without portal hypertension. But then in patients with portal hypertension also, it's imperative that we start carvedilol or a non-selective beta blocker. And we have data from a trial called the Predesky trial showing that you can actually delay decompensation. So this has been a very important thing that we can offer this patient population. And sometimes, unfortunately, in the real world, it's underutilized. We used to also offer the endoscopy routinely, and then, based on varices, no varices, decide on beta blockers. But now we realize that you can delay decompensation even in the form of ascites. So I think when I diagnose someone based on Baveno criteria or clinically significant portal hypertension, I automatically start them on carvedilol and then up titrate based on heart rate and tolerability to decrease the chances of decompensation. So these are things that can be done today. They are allowed also to be done within the context of clinical trials, because we don't want to deny patients effective treatments because they are in a clinical trial. And then the lifestyle intervention is still crucial in this patient population. And weight loss is still important, and improving muscle function is very important to make sure that they don't keep progressing toward sarcopenia. We have data with bariatric surgery also that when you operate on patients with compensated cirrhosis, you can change outcomes. And we believe that this is mediated by the significant weight loss. So as Sven said, maybe GLP-1 receptor agonists didn't show improvement in cirrhotics on histology, but if you follow them long-term for outcomes, I do believe that they may show benefits.
Please join us again next week when we continue our roundtable on advances in drug development in the last year, and dedicate the rest of our episode to honoring the memory of Stephen Harrison on the first anniversary of his passing.
And until then, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you next week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami. Bye-bye now.